Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jeevanam Kaviviridhitam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatatam Bhuvi Grinanti Ye Bhurida Janaha. We were discussing about Sri Ramakrishna's birthday celebrations, where Sri Ramakrishna was explaining how Satchidananda is like an infinite ocean, and when it becomes cold, the water becomes cold, the ocean water in some places freezes into ice, and this icebergs rather, float in different shapes. In the same way, he's saying the bhakti of the devotee is like the cold which we see, the cool, the cold in the water, and that makes Satchidananda freeze and take a form. So when the son of Jnana, when son of Jnana rises, no matter uh, when the sun of Jnana rises, the ice melts, even the icebergs melt, and God becomes formless. So no matter whether you start your worship as uh, worshipping God with form, the personal God, who is your Ishta, slowly the Ishta, when the true knowledge dawns, he will give you the realization that it is all the ocean of Satchidananda. He is nothing but Satchidananda. And Sri Ramakrishna uses a beautiful simile. He says, when the sun of Jnana rises, the ice melts, it becomes water as before, water above, water below, water everywhere. That is why they pray in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord, you are with form and you are also the formless. We see you wandering around like a human being, though the Vedas say you are beyond mind and speech. So Bhagavata gives the essence of the concept of incarnation, because this is a highly debated point. We understand deities, they appear with form, but how can Satchidananda appear in human form? That is a mystery which many people do not seem to accept. Even though Advaitins will definitely not accept it, pure Advaitins, but even others, they find that we can at the most consider God in his human incarnation as the Son of God, not God himself. It would be blasphemy to say that God has incarnated and as a human being. But Bhagavata supports this. He says he also wanders around like a human being, though the Vedas say that you are beyond mind and speech. That way, even the devotees are the deities cannot be called as Satchidananda because it has a form. But that is the wonder of Prakriti or Maya, that it makes the impossible possible. Though the Lord is beyond speech and mind in the ultimate sense, but still, for some devotees, how does that happen? Sri Ramakrishna gives another beautiful example. He says, so one can say, according to the Bhagavata, that for some devotees he assumes eternal forms. There are places where the ice never melts, it assumes the form of the crystal. I mean, there can be places. So, giving this example, Sri Ramakrishna seems to say that what happens to those who believe in eternal Krishna, eternal Rama, eternal Ramakrishna? They just don't want that form to dissolve into the by the jnana of knowledge. They say it is fine. We don't want. We want to eternally sport with our Lord, though we've known him to be Satchidananda, but we want our Krishna in the form of Krishna of Brindavan, Rama in the form he was in Ayodhya. In fact, Hanuman, when Hanuman was confronted, I mean, Hanuman is supposed to be immortal. So there is a story that Hanuman once came in contact with Sri Krishna. And I mean, he wanted to see his Ishta only as Rama. So when Krishna incarnated after the Ramayana, of course, as the incarnation of when he incarnated as Krishna, he said, "I am happy with my Rama. I don't want Krishna because that is how I saw." But at the same time, the same Hanuman once said that when I consider myself as the body, I would prefer the form of Rama, because that is the form I like most. That is the human form I worshipped and I adored. I was devoted to. So when we are gross, when we consider ourselves as bodies with souls, not souls with body, but bodies predominantly, then we would like the Lord to sport in human form as our Ishta. So he says, but when I consider myself as a subtle being, not as one who possesses a body, when I raise myself to that level, then I see I am part of Rama, the universal cosmic being who is Rama. I am part of him. But when he says, when I raise myself further, when I think of myself as a soul, as the pure Atma, Jivatma, then I become one with the Paramatma, because that is the Advaitic truth. Then Rama and me, there is absolutely no difference. That is what Sri Ramakrishna says here, that in places where the sun of knowledge melts the icebergs, it is water, water everywhere. But there are some places where it is solid part of the time, but when there is jnana, it melts. But there are some places where the dualist says, I don't care, even if he is Sachidananda. He may be Sachidananda, but I want to see him only in that form. So he gives that form, the form whom he adores most. The eternal nature of Sachidananda is my Sri Rama or my Sri Krishna or my Sri Ramakrishna. So when we talk of our Ishta, whether it is Rama, Krishna or Ramakrishna, we can either consider him to be a personal God, like the iceberg in the ocean of Sachidananda, or as an iceberg in the Arctics which never melts. That is also fine. That is for the confirmed dualist who doesn't want the sun of Jnana to dissolve that form of that iceberg, because he wants to see the eternal Rama or the eternal Krishna or the eternal Ramakrishna. So Kedar says, who had read the Bhagavata, when Sri Ramakrishna was explaining the Bhagavata, he says, sir, in the Srimad Bhagavata, Vyasadeva prayed for God's forgiveness for 3 misgivings. There is a verse in the Bhagavata. So a person who believes in a personal God, he can interact with that God as a human being. He can go to that God with all his faults, all, and ask him for pardon for all the things which he might have inadvertently done, because that is what we understand. If he is not a human being, then it is very difficult to develop a relationship with a formless God, and then we don't know how we react or how uh, we do not know how to interact with that God. Of what use is a God who is formless? Whom am I speaking to? Whom am I praying to? How can I develop a relationship with that God? So it is said that in the Bhagavata, this particular aspect is addressed. And Vyasa says, praise for God's forgiveness for 3 misgivings. At one place he says, O Bhagavan, you are beyond mind and speech. Since you are beyond mind and speech, that is your real essence. Vedas say that you are beyond mind and speech. I can't express the inexpressible. You are Brahman. But still, I am narrating your Leela, the worldly play. That is only one of your aspects. You can be doing the Leela with the form which you have assumed, but that is not all. My Sri Ramakrishna or my Ramakrishna or my Krishna or my Rama as a human being, as an avatara, is one aspect of the God whom I worship. He is without form. He is the Sachidananda. But at the same time, I have worshipped him. So you please pardon me if I have made a mistake. Now you can ask for pardon from a person. You can't ask for pardon when you consider God to be formless. Then who is going to respond? Somebody who has a mind, somebody who has a body, somebody who is as human as we are, will respond to our prayers. He can be very near to us, and we can ask him or seek his support, seek his protection, just as we seek the protection of human beings who, because of their limited capacity, can't help us. So we imagine, or we not imagine, we understand that the same Sachidananda, though he has come in a human form, because of my prayers, because of my devotion, he comes in a human form to help me, because I am devoted to him, to understand his Leela and understand the true import of his Leela, and thus being devoted, he will give me the highest knowledge. So Vyasa prays, tells Bhagwan that I have, though you are formless, you are beyond form as described in the Vedas, but maybe I made a mistake, but please pardon me. I want to describe your Leela. I want to see you as Krishna. And as Krishna, you have performed such a wonderful Leela, which is so. Krishna, in fact, means one who attracts. So Krishna has that attracting power, which attracts the attention. That is the only thing that is worth at be getting attracted to, because according to the Bhagavata, he with his divine Leela, which is very difficult to fathom or understand, he manages to attract the attention of his mother Yashoda, who is not his real mother, of the gopis who are in no way related to him. That is because of the tremendous attracting power of Satchidananda Brahman. So that Brahman, when it comes assumes a human form, it can do the impossible, because he is the one who conducts this Leela, this divine Leela or so-called worldly play. That's why we don't say that we always say he's acting, because we know he's beyond name and form. But at the same time, nothing is impossible for him. He can give us security, can give us protection, just as any human being does, but in a much more intense sense. So Sri Ramakrishna, when Narendranath was confused, he went to many religious leaders and asked, "Have you seen God?" Everybody says that they have seen. I mean, they say that the scriptures say that they have seen God, but after asking many people, no person had a real experience of God. God with form. So Sri Ramakrishna had an experience of God with form, God without form, and God as the all-pervading reality. In all the three aspects, in the Dvaita aspect, Vishishta Dvaita aspect, and the Advaita aspect. So he could say, I see him. But how do I see him? I see him more clearly than I do see you. I see you as a limited human being, as a jiva, but I see the Lord as Shiva himself having taken this form. So that comes because of ultimate realization that Sachidananda, and a conviction, a transcendental experience. So if we see, even in Sri Ramakrishna's case, his first vision, he was through pure yearning, he wanted to know, Mother, please, I am an illiterate person. People say there is God. Ram Prasad says there is God. He has seen you. All these saints and all these Mahapurushas through ages, they have seen, had vision. I never had a single vision. Are you true? Are you living? Am I fooling myself by worshipping the Bhavatarini as a pujari? If you are not living, if you are not a living reality, then am I wasting my time? So that was the earnest call of a devotee, which forces the Lord to assume a human form and answer. So that is the greatness of this incarnation. How do incarnations manifest themselves? They do the impossible, because they are in charge of the whole worldly play or Leela. If they are in charge of the Leela, they can do anything. They can manifest as a human being, they can manifest as a deity, they can show a vision, they can show themselves in different ways through the senses, though they are beyond the senses. So, but at the same time, they have that conviction that the Lord which I see, the Lord whom I experience in my transcendental vision, is not like any other human being. He is far superior, having the quality of Satchidananda, though for the time being, through his Leela, he is showing me one of his aspects, that is one with form. So also when we say Parama Prakriti, the Divine Mother in her unmanifest form is Parama Prakriti. But when she becomes Prakriti, she manifests. That same Prakriti, that same Parama Prakriti manifests itself through time, space, and causation as our Divine Mother, as our Mother who is dear to us. As children, we worship her in whichever way we want to, as a kind mother, or as a kind father, or as a kind ruler. So there are so many aspects of the personal God. Tvameva mata pita, tvameva bandhu, sakha tvameva. You are my friend, you are my friend, you are my father, you are my mother. I can establish any relationship. If I know the secret behind the divine Leela, then it really doesn't matter whether he's the father or the mother. Any relationship which I like and I appreciate in the worldly sense, I can worship him. But as Vyasa does here in the Bhagavata, which shows that Bhagavata is not only Dvaita text, it doesn't only describe the glory of Krishna, it describes the glory of the real Krishna, who is Sachidananda. It is the real Krishna who has come in this yuga, in that yuga as the Krishna, who has come in the previous yuga as Rama, and who also has come in this yuga as Ramakrishna, as he told Narendranath when he was still doubting that how can it be possible that one who is beyond time, space, and causation, how can he come in a form and talk with us, have cancer, and suffer this? But that universal mind immediately understood what what Swami Vivekananda was thinking in his mind. He said, even now, are you doubting? Are you doubting your Guru? Can you not realize? Can you not see that he who was Rama and who he was Krishna has come as Sri Ramakrishna, as Ramakrishna this time? What did he mean? Did he mean? And then he immediately adds, not in your Vedantic sense, in the sense in Advaita Vedanta, all are incarnations. This form Nama Rupa is nothing. It is just a wave in the ocean of Sachidananda. So I am maybe a small wave, the incarnation may be a large wave, but according to Advaita, we are made of the same substance. And he is not bothered to worship that big wave. He says, as long as we realize the transcendental Brahman in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, or in the highest Samadhi, where we become one with that God, we don't care whether there is an incarnation. So, but at the same time, though they do not believe in incarnation, they believe in the Guru. That is why Shankaracharya wrote, Guru Rangri Padme Manaschena Lagnam Tathakim Tathakim. So he says, if now that Guru has taken the role of an incarnation in Advaita, even they believe. They don't believe that this knowledge can transcendental experience. It has to come through Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. First, hearing about those great truths. We can't just read it from the Upanishads and get a realization like that. Even they believe in some sort of Guru, the Guru tradition. And they believe that it is my Guru who will take me to the shores of the infinite. So that may not be, they may not believe in the concept of incarnation, but they believe that that the infinite can come in the form of the Guru. The Upanishads, and explain the true import of Upanishads and give me that transcendental experience. So somewhere that acceptance of the divine Leela, that is why Shankaracharya wrote so many stotras of the Divine Mother, different aspects of the Divine Mother, different aspects of, even he seems to have commented on the Vishnu Sahasranama. Though, then what is the question? If he's an Advaitin, why should he accept Vishnu? Why should he accept Narayana? Why should he accept all the different gods and goddesses and incarnations? But still, though many of Advaitins mistakenly think that, but ultimate truth may be Advaita, but at the same time, to reach it, it is not impossible. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna, impossible that God will come in a human form. This aspect, very clearly. This is a thing which very few people understand, but gospel is very, very unequivocal. It says, yes, God is with form and he is also formless. Furthermore, he is even beyond form and formlessness. There is no limit to him. Now, this is maybe difficult to understand, but that is the ultimate truth which Sri Krishna explains in the gospel. Now, he concludes with this and giving the example of the ocean, where the waves are part of the ocean, but when it merges, the waves die down and they become part, they cannot be considered apart from the ocean. In that sense, he is formless. But at the same time, he can assume form. The ocean can take the form of the waves. And he is even beyond form and formlessness. There is no limit to him. Now, this is the essence of the all-comprehensive vision of Vedanta, which Sri Ramakrishna explains in a very simple way. In the beginning, M, as you see, when he first came, according to the Brahmo tradition, he did not believe in God with form. And it was a shock for him when Sri Ramakrishna said, why can't God come and take a form? Who are you to tell him? Who are you to dictate? It is Satchidananda, the play. If the divine being can take the form of creation, can create this manifold variety, then why can't it be one with that universe? Why can't it manifest that unity? So the formless aspect is also God's. The God with form is also another aspect of the same thing, just as Parama Prakriti and Prakriti, though appearing different from different standpoints, they are the same. Now, uh, now we come to a very important chapter which forms the core of Sri Ramakrishna's message. So somebody once asked Holy Mother, see, did Sri Ramakrishna come to establish harmony? Many sects were quarreling with each other. Some said Vishnu is true, some said Shakti worship is the only way. You see, Prakriti is feminine, some said no, is masculine. God the Father, then you say God is the mother, then God is the eternal companion. There's so many ways. God is transcendental. How can you, for some religions, it's blasphemy to say that God, he can be the son of God. He can be, but he can never be God. So some people don't understand. But apart from all these conflicting things, Sri Ramakrishna did not come. Holy Mother very clearly said that he did not come for harmony of religions. He was like a spiritual glutton, she said. He practiced all these religions because he was amused. He said, see, some people believe in Krishna, some people believe in Rama, some people believe in Devi, some people believe in something else, they believe in Allah. So all the religious sects, once he had the experience by the grace of the mother through pure yearning, which was his strong point. And there's one more strong point, and that is absolute renunciation. So mother says, it is harmony of religions is not a big contribution. Vedas say, Vedas very clearly say that we sages call it by Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. The sages call him by different names, but the truth is one. So it is nothing new which Sri Ramakrishna said. But at the same time, he practiced each religion and showed it. But was that the main mission of his life? No. The main mission of his life was to demonstrate what tyaga is, what renunciation is. And that perfect dispassion, which a gross world, a world which was being slowly immersed in worldliness, not only the Western world, but Indians were also taking up Western values very fast. When I say Western values, I do not mean the values which of religion and spirituality, which also developed in the West, uh, thanks to great prophets. But I'm talking of the scientific and materialistic civilization, which thought matter is everything, something like the Charvakas. So Sri Ramakrishna's challenge was not to establish a harmony that would have come about anyway. Holy Mother says that is not his main contribution. But what is his main contribution? His contribution, she says, which came as a slap on the face of people who thought money is everything, sex is everything, Kamini Kanchan is everything. So he, with brutal frankness, that's why when the gospel was first published in the West, naturally the translator found it very difficult. When you translate the Bengali word Kamini and Kanchan, literally speaking, it means woman and gold. It does not mean lust and wealth or greed. Literally speaking, it is a figurative way of saying. But we have to remember that Sri Ramakrishna was speaking to men. So when he spoke to men, for him, lust or sex was nothing but woman. So uh, people thought in the West that if we translate it like that, Kamini Kanchan as woman and gold, then the women folk who were fighting for gender equality, they will feel offended. Why Sri Ramakrishna says, are women bad? Are not men equally bad? The answer is that it is the grossness which he referred to when he said woman and gold. Kamini Kanchan in Bengali or in Sanskrit, though it may mean literally, but it is a figurative way of telling. Gold is not just gold. It can be silver, it can be property, it can be money, it can be notes, paper notes, it can be checks. It can mean any kind of wealth, material wealth. And lust can be figuratively said to be Kamini. So Kamini Kanchan Tyag is the word used in the Bengali gospel. Though it is figuratively used, one should remember it was addressed to. That is why in some translations it has been translated as lust, so that women don't take it, are not offended, because that is not the meaning. Thakur was never, in fact, if anybody has respected women, it is Thakur and Thakur alone. He raised the level, the gender of the women's empowerment, spiritual empowerment, to such a level which has never happened before in the history. Though Holy Mother did not mention this, but Swamiji very clearly says it is to raise the level of women in the real sense, not just to give her gender equality and give her a few jobs and then trample upon her. No, that is not the real empowerment. Sri Ramakrishna went to the extent of worshipping his own wife, his spiritual consort, and raising her to the level of the Divine Mother who was all in all for him. And then he said, my job is done, now you have to continue and you have to do more than I do. That is real spiritual empowerment. So Sri Ramakrishna came for that purpose, and that was his uniqueness, not the Sarva Dharma Samanvay. No doubt there are quarrels even today in the name of religion. But Sri Ramakrishna's purpose, that was an indirect fruit of his sadhana. He just was a spiritual glutton. He wanted to enjoy God in as many forms as possible before he died. He lived for 49 years and a few months. But after his first realization, he became hungry, as a glutton becomes hungry to enjoy different types of sweets and food. Sri Ramakrishna said, I am not happy with this experience. One experience, the first experience, was such a joy. Then he said, how Vaishnavas enjoy Krishna. How do they enjoy the sport of Krishna? I want to see that. And a Vaishnava guru came. Then the Tantras, they worship Divine Mother. I want to feel how a child loves the Divine Mother. How as a child sadhaka, the Divine Mother's love can be felt. So he performed the Tantras, the Shakti Puja in different ways. 64 Tantras Bhairavi Brahmani taught him. So all these sadhanas, they were done for his spiritual satisfaction. He never, just as we are never satiated by money, by no matter how much money we have and no matter how much other things we have possess in life, we are not satisfied. Like Yayati asked his youth, a youthful son, to exchange his youth with him, because he felt that he has become old and he can no more enjoy the pleasure of the senses. So he said, can we give me your youth? There was a system where if he did a certain ritual, he could get the youth of his. The son was so much shocked by his father's request that this person has enjoyed his whole life. Now he wants to extend his youth and wants to enjoy. He says, what is there in this? His son was fortunately a great sadhaka. He said, okay, anyway, I have no use. Whether I am youthful or not, it doesn't really make, because this age, this body has a certain age. After a few years, even I will become old. So I don't want a few extra years of youth because they are useless for me. I want to go beyond the senses. You take, you enjoy. So the father shamelessly takes the youth, and again she becomes young. Again he perhaps marries and has children and so many things. And finally, at the end of his life, that same person who wrote a treatise in Sanskrit, how to enjoy life, how to enjoy the sensual life, the same person writes a book on Vairagya Shatakam. And he says in that famous verse which Swami Vivekananda quotes, that to satisfy, to reach the ultimate through the enjoyment of the senses is like pouring ghee into a already burning fire. The fire is already burning, and you think you are dousing the fire by pouring more ghee. The more ghee you put, the more the fire flares up. So that is how, after getting the youth of his son, King Yayati, who wrote that Vairagya Shatakam, got so much disgusted. See, what have I done? I was not happy with the sensual pleasures which I got as a young person. I took the youthfulness of my son in exchange, and he just gave it without any second thought, because he knew anyway it is useless to have 50 years and to be a youth, to keep oneself young for another 10 years with all sorts of techniques. How long can you one become retain one's youth? So that Vairagya Shatakam, if you read, we will not believe that a person who was so much attached to his body gets disgusted at the end. And he says, is this what I achieved in my life? I was, in fact, I did only one thing by pouring ghee into the fire which was raging in my heart. A fire was raging, and I tried to douse that fire. I thought it will be satisfied if I become youthful again and start enjoying the sensual pleasures. But pouring it is just did the opposite thing. It increased the fire, and no matter how many births I take, it is not going to be satisfied. So Thakur is now telling Rakhal's father, Swami Brahmananda, whose first intention, you should remember, he allowed Rakhal to come to Sri Ramakrishna because he thought a lot of important people were coming to Sri Ramakrishna. Now, many people go to religion or religious places because they see a lot of prominent people visit, prominent devotees visit. When I was in India, there was a center. I once, in fact, overheard a rich businessman who had unfortunately taken Diksha or initiation. I don't know how he got through, but I was shocked when he invited a friend of his, who was perhaps a businessman who was struggling. And naturally, businessmen want contacts. They want more and more contacts so that they can earn more and more money. So this gentleman who was initiated into Mantra Diksha, for him, it was a license to earn more money. Perhaps with that reason, he would have taken Diksha. So he was overheard. I myself overheard him telling another friend, "You come to this ashram, this place of here. That person, that millionaire, that billionaire, that businessman. They all visit here. It will be a good occasion to get introduced to those people. It will help your business. So you come here and take Diksha or be a member of this organization so that you can enhance your worldly prospects." So Rakhal's father was no less than that. It is very surprising. But Rakhal Rakhal is Swami Brahmananda, who later on became Swami Brahmananda. His father, in the beginning, he thought, oh, Sri Ramakrishna, Keshav Chandra Sen, all the big people, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and there are so many great, Dr. Mahendralal Sarkar, all the rich and the so-called people with worldly attainments, they are coming here and sitting at the feet of Thakur. So maybe he didn't understand spirituality, but he knew this. My son, if he goes there, he will make acquaintance with these rich people, and that will be good for his worldly prospects. He thought Rakhal would become more interested and achieve more worldly treasures or all these things. So, and see the fun. how honestly M is reporting. Rakhal is living with Thakur these days. That's why many of the rich people of Calcutta, including some of the people who Devendranath Tagore and the other people who were sophisticated and well-placed people, they were angry because Thakur spoke his mind out. That was one characteristic of his. That he didn't believe in toning down the quality of his words. That was one characteristic of his. He will just see what, like a child, what he sees and what he feels about the nature of life. He was not one who will mince matters and tone down the requirements of spirituality. So Master Mashe also knew that he has to record whatever happens. It may be Rakhal's father. Rakhal later on became Swami Brahmanand. He was very much loved by Sri Ramakrishna. But if his father was worldly, or if his father had worldly motives, it was M, not only others, but he exposed himself. In some places, he himself showed that how greedy I was, how worldly I was, and how by coming to Thakur I have changed. So he gives a graphic display and he says Rakhal's father is married again after the passing away of his mother. Now, this is something which we don't declare in public, especially in India. It has become very common maybe in European countries, but in those days, uh, to marry again, it is a sign of worldliness. But here, he was so much attached to his son, he sometimes comes to see Rakhal. He says he has no objection to Rakhal staying here. As I said, he is a rich worldly man, always busy with litigation and other matters. A number of lawyers, deputy magistrates, and the like often come to visit Thakur. Now, that is his interest. His interest in Thakur is not that he wants spirituality. Rakhal's father saw that it is easy to catch these deputy magistrates and lawyers who come for various reasons to Thakur. But if I come here, my litigation, my law matters will be solved very easily. So to consult them, he is coming for a worldly purpose to Dakshineshwar. So you can imagine, and this is not hidden from M. So M is recording that. He is a worldly man. He initially thought Rakhal will be very, the company of Sri Ramakrishna and the people who visit would be good for Rakhal for his worldly prospects. He had perhaps no idea that Rakhal would become a monk. But anyway, he has come. Sri Ramakrishna looks at Rakhal's father every now and then. Now, he knows Sri Ramakrishna could read Rakhal's mind, Rakhal's father's mind, as if he could read the things inside the glass case. So he wants Rakhal to stay with him in Dakshineshwar because he knows he is a wonderful, spiritually empowered person. But he knows that if he goes back to his father, it will be dangerous for him, and that happened actually. So it was with great difficulty he wanted that Rakhal should not be much in touch. Whatever wonderful spirituality is there, that would get a worldly uh, a worldly a worldly color if he goes back to his home. So he is keen that somehow Rakhal's father, whatever may be the reason, allows him to stay in the ashram. Yeah, stay with him in Dakshineshwar, so that he can protect him, just like a mother protects the young hatched birds, the young newly hatched birds. How does a duck or a swan just cover the birds and protects them when they are just born? So Thakur was in that mood. He did not want his father. Let him come with whatever motive he wants, but as long as it doesn't disturb uh, Rakhal, it is fine. So deliberately, Sri Ramakrishna is telling Rakhal's father and the devotees who are there, saying that, uh, giving a clear indication to Rakhal's father, don't think that he is coming here for uh, enhancing his worldly prospects to meet lawyers and other famous people who are coming here. He is coming, see his mood. Oh, what a mood Rakhal is in these days. Watch him. And if you watch him carefully, you will see his lips move every now and then. So Thakur is observing all these things, that he is doing japa. He is so sincere that not only is he staying there, but using his all his time, whatever little time he gets, because he knows his father may just take him back to his home, where again he will be immersed in worldliness. So he says, indirectly requesting Rakal's father, see how wonderful his nature is. He's constantly doing japa here. So his lips are always moving, he's mentally repeating the Lord's name. And then he says something very significant. He gives the example of a Homa bird, which we had never read. They say there is the mention of this Homa bird in the Vedas. All these boys are of the class of the ever perfect. These boys means Rakhal and others. Maybe there was Naren there. They are born with the knowledge of Lord within. No matter how much you try to make them worldly, they will never become. They will know when they are a little older that much contact with the world will bring a sure fall. So he gives such a wonderful example. It took a lot of time for scholars to find out how did Thakur know this, because this is not very commonly available. This Homa bird, if you search the dictionary or even try to search the scriptures, it is very difficult. There is a remote mention that Homa bird, but what is this Homa bird? Whether that bird is there, biologically speaking, we don't see such a bird in Prakriti, in nature. What happens is, in the Vedas, now when Sri Krishna says it must be truth, he will not say anything which is he has not confirmed, which he has not seen. That is why once he told something about the Homa bird, and Naren said, I saw a Chataka bird. There is a wonderful incident to show that Sri Krishna could never tell an untruth. He said, Chataka birds are those birds which never drink the dirty water of the earth. Once the water falls on the earth, it is polluted. So this Chataka will wait till the rain comes and then drink the water directly before it falls on the earth. Now, Naren had read a description of Chataka bird somewhere, and he saw one bird was, it may be a variety of a sparrow, which was taking water from the mud puddle lying on the ground. So he quickly ran and came and told Sri Krishna, I saw a Chataka bird taking water. So Sri Krishna was upset. How can I tell an untruth? Untruth never escapes my life. He was so much wedded to untruth that if he tells a untruth, even by mistake, he would not tell an untruth. So he said, let me see, let me see. Then once Naren took him and showed him, see, the Chataka bird is drinking water from the ground. Then he nicely scolded him. See, I believed you because he was his favorite disciple. He said, I thought you will be more wise than this. Is that Chataka? Then he named the name. Thakur knew all the species. So he said, that is a sparrow. And you said it is a Chataka bird is drinking. I thought, how can my knowledge go wrong? So he says, in the Vedas, there is a mention of this Homa bird. Now, this example is so apt, showing how these direct disciples who are his Antaranga were never touched by the world. To show that, he gives a graphic example, and that also from the Vedas. So whatever he had heard once, somebody must have recited the Vedas, and the Homa bird would have been found to be mentioned there, and he remembered that, and he says, there is a bird which is known as Homa, which lives high in the sky. It never comes down to earth. I mean, it may be a mythical bird, but it is mentioned in the Vedas. It lays its egg in the sky, and the egg begins to fall. It doesn't lay the egg in the, it doesn't want the egg to have the touch of worldly people. So after some days, the young chick breaks out of its shell and continues the fall. But it is so high that it grows the wings before it falls and crashes to the ground. Only the shell goes and crashes, but the bird somehow flaps the wings and again flies off. It doesn't touch the ground. So it grows its wings and opens its eyes and says, oh, I'm going to fall down. And then it just flies. It doesn't even touch the earth. Falling on the ground will mean sure death. So, seeing the earth fast approaching, the young bird suddenly swoops upward towards its mother. It has but one aim, to reach its mother. And then he says, all these youngsters, including Rakhal, are like this Homa bird. They are afraid of the world from their early years. They have only one care, how to reach the mother, how to attain the Lord. You might ask, how can they have such jnana and bhakti living among worldly people and born out of the semen of worldly parents? So here also, Sri Ramakrishna is explaining, if they were really like this, then why were they born of worldly parents, like Rakhal's father? He is indirectly hinting at that. Could it be possible that a perfected being will be born to ordinary parents? The question is also asked, if Jesus was the son of a carpenter, there's so many carpenters here, all do not become Jesus. So the idea that we inherit our samskaras from our previous birth. Our biological parents give us only the biological characteristics. You may inherit a few diseases or a few bodily characteristics, physical characteristics of the parents. But beyond that, there is no connection between your spiritual growth and their spiritual growth. So this, he himself is answering this question as if a scientist is being asked by a seeker. You might ask, is Sri Ramakrishna is explaining so that Rakhal's father does not have a doubt that I am a rich lawyer, I am a worldly person, I have so much wealth, and naturally, because of the hereditary influence, my son also will become like me, a top lawyer or a rich person. So, how can he become spiritual? That was not the intention with which he sent his son here. He wanted his son to get acquainted with all the rich people coming. So he says, how can they have such, and very openly says, how can we be born out of the semen of worldly parents? There is a deep meaning to this. Now, Sri Ramakrishna is giving another very graphic example. He says, if a gram falls, gram is a chana, falls on a mound of dung, even if it falls on dirt, it will still germinate into a gram plant. That tree will give gram only. It won't give dirt, it won't give it, no matter if you even put how useful such a gram is. Now people want, so that is why when we put the dirty manure, thinking that the manure, we are afraid that the manure may find its way, but it never happens. A gram will always become a gram. It will give rise to gram and we'll eat that, no matter where you throw it. Even if you throw it in a good soil or in a dirty soil, it will follow its own path. So also, like this Homa bird, these people will never be attached to the world. They, it might have fallen on a heap of dung, but does it mean that it will become a plant of some other type? So you see how Sri Ramakrishna is explaining in front of his father and telling him that he doesn't belong to you. You may have given birth to him, but he is born with a, like this Homa bird, is going to fly. So what a mood Rakhal is developing these days. But how could it be otherwise? But he jokes. He wants to now convince his father that you also try to become spiritual. See, your son is such a spiritual person, so why don't you try? So he's cracking a joke now. If the arum is of, arum means that is a kind of root, is of a good quality, its shoots are also good, like father, like son. So perhaps he was, and everybody starts laughing. Now perhaps by this time the father has realized that Sri Ramakrishna is somewhat hinting to him that such a wonderful son you have got, and why don't you just follow his example and try to become a little more spiritual? Because if the shoot is good, then the root also will be, should be good. But this was in a lighter mood, he said that, so everybody laughed. And I don't know whether Rakhal's father took a hint and understood what Sri Ramakrishna was hinting at, because he was very soft spoken, at least in the beginning he was very harsh, but then he felt that let him, if he is wise enough, he'll take a hint and not disturb his son from following the spiritual path. Then M is now interfering in this, not interfering, is putting a question. And he says, he has explained God with form and God without form so well. Do the Vaishnavas believe in God with form? So it's just, there were some people who are very fanatic. They said there cannot be God without form. But Sri Krishna, before Girindra came, he had explained how God can be formless and with form. So he is asking, Girindra then now has understood that what Sri Krishna said. He said, perhaps they do, but the Vaishnavas are one-sided. I mean, he wanted to say that if they don't believe, as the Bhagavata says, but even Bhagavata says, Krishna is without form and he is also with form. And we forgive, the Vyasa asks for forgiveness and he says, oh Lord, please forgive me if I have said that you are only with form. You are with form, you are without form. So Sri Krishna is just repeating that, and M is pointing out to Girindra and addressing all the fanatics, Vaishnavas, who perhaps by mistake they don't understand their own scripture, that is Bhagavata. They should remember what Thakur said: God can be formless, God can be with form, and God can be both or beyond that. So M then says, have you been able to understand the eternal form of God? What about the crystal? I am not able to understand it well. So now Sri Krishna is overhearing this conversation. M is asking, discussing with Girindra. Sri Krishna seems to saying that you have heard something from me and you are asking for somebody else for the explanation. He was a bit upset, thinking that these two people are discussing to themselves when the Guru is still there. So M and Girindra smile because he did not want, perhaps it was not the intention of M to disturb Sri Krishna, but see the attention which Sri Krishna gives. He very nicely says, well brother, what are you talking about? And Girindra and all smile, but they don't reply. They don't say that we were discussing this point. Then Brinde, the maid servant, says to Ramlal, I say, Ramlal, please give this man his meal. You may give my meal later on. Sri Krishna says, what? You have not given Brinde her meal? So now we will end here because, this Brinde was one person. This shows how Sri Krishna used to deal with all difficult type of people. See, all those who came to him were not of the same quality. Some were like Rakhal, some were like Rakhal's father, and there were some irritating people like Brinde also. So she was irritated if her prasad was not given to her. She didn't care for anything else. No doubt she was a very devoted, not devoted, she was a very honest maid servant who used to look after certain things in that campus. So she used to clean the stairs and all those things. But Sri Krishna had so much love and concern for everybody. Even if people did not come with the spiritual purpose, Brinde did not know anything beyond taking prasad like Hriday. Hriday also had worldly motives, though he served Thakur. But Brinde, Thakur was upset because he said, have you not given her meal? He was so particular because he did not want trouble. If she did not get her food or on due time, she used to just shout and shout at people. So Sri Krishna did not want that to happen. She did not want the peace of that place to be disturbed. So he said, it is just a matter of giving her the food. Please give her that food on time so that she doesn't come and create a scene here. You see, Sri Krishna, though he was on a high spiritual plane and he did not care for the world, but he was very particular that certain things, if people want, he knew that Brinde is a very sincere worker there, a maid who was doing her duty sincerely. But unfortunately, she had her own uh, um, uh, thing and she deserved that whatever little share of prasad. So once you might have noticed in one of the earlier conversation, somebody had taken away her share of the prasad. So Sri Krishna was so worried. He said, please get some aloo, some potatoes, and we will have to request her to cook her food now. Somebody has taken away her cooked food. But fortunately, that day she was in a good mood. And Brinde said, no, no, it's okay, okay, whatever is there, you give me. And she uh, uh, ungrudgingly left that place. So you see Sri Krishna's observation here. And he is so concerned. On one side, he is talking of the highest realization, and on the other side, he wants to see that everybody who does his or her duty perfectly should get his or her dues, and he is very concerned about this. So after that, the devotees are singing kirtan in the Panchvati in the afternoon, so that the whole conversation changes. Sri Ramakrishna joins them, repeating the name of Divine Mother with the devotees. He is filled with joy. There is a beautiful song. We will discuss it in our next class. So let me just take up the questions if they are there. Yes. Some sadhak, it is said that some sadhaka in music, they try and can see the rupa of the swaras, which is described, the nema and the swaras is the nama, can be transformed into rupa and vice versa. Now this is a different field. I would not like to elaborate on this, whether certain tunes and certain musical forms can create that particular form. They say when Tansen and all used to great singers, when they sang each note with perfection, certain forms, we even recently it was proved that if you vibrate a certain metal plate with iron filings on that, and if there is a particular music, it gives different patterns. Now it is a very, very big science which involves the science of sound vibrations. So we do not know what is its truth. It's not a topic today. Today's topic, if I so this swaras, whether they can give rise to certain forms, it is a very, very long subject, long topic, and maybe on some other occasion when we deal with this. But today's essence, coming back to the essence of what we talked today, what we read today, that Sri Ramakrishna in his this particular incident shows very clearly that he would not compromise, especially in the case of Rakhal. How carefully he preserved the disciples' spiritual values, and how anxious he was to protect, as a mother would be to protect the children. As carefully as that, he was protecting, whereas at the same time letting know his father that your son has great spiritual possibilities. He is not of this world, and he does not even hesitate to say that even if he is born of worldly parents, a person with samskaras will always fulfill that promise, and he will revert back, or no matter, even if he is put in the mud, he will somehow sprout, and the original form will come out sooner or later. So Sri Ramakrishna used to give the example of a lotus. He said lotus is a beautiful flower, but you see always it grows in mud. So under contrary circumstances, under the most difficult circumstances also in the world, people who are meant to flower, who are meant to see that the divinity shines through their personality, they will do it, whether um, mud, they grow in the mud or grow in the filth. They will, whatever be the situation around, the samskaras will never die, and they will somehow they will fulfill themselves in some way or the other. So that is the takeaway of today's conversation. I take your leave. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Thanks, Swamiji. Jai Swamiji.
Jai
Namaste, Swamiji. Thank you.